You work for me? Written by Anonymous on AO3, read by Alextris. Chapter 2. Experiment. Something was flying through the air. Think fast! Peter's hand shot up without looking, effortlessly catching the object in his hand while his attention and other hand were still on the vending machine. Blinking, he opened his hand and looked at the candy bar?
"What's this?"
he asked, turning to look at the owner of the company, strolling towards him like he was taking a relaxing walk in the park. This? Some food. Living on pure coffee isn't good for you, kiddo.
"Speaking from experience."
Do as I say, not as I do.
What a poetic way to say I'm a hypocrite.
Tony raised an eyebrow, and Peter remembered who he was speaking to.
I mean, you have such a beautiful way with words, Mr. Stark, sir. I wouldn't be able to say it so well, that's what I meant.
Sure, Tony drawled. By the way, I wanted to ask you a question. Me? Uh-oh.
Yes?
Peter smiled awkwardly. You were on the field trip to Oscorp when you were 14. Is that correct? Peter's mouth dropped open. What the fuck? An air of satisfaction surrounded Tony as he stood there watching Peter's stumped expression. There were pictures on your school's website, not to mention your classmates' social media posts. Tony continued, looking straight into Peter's eyes. Quite a coincidence, wouldn't you say? Peter forced himself to think. That was not proof, just speculation. He didn't have to just stand there and take it. He needed to fight back, make Tony regret ever uttering those words out loud.
Mr. Stark, he stammered. I've heard rumours, but I didn't know it was this bad.
Tony frowned. This bad?
Yeah.
Peter nodded, squirming in place.
Your dislike for Oscorp. Am I getting fired for going on a school trip when I was 14 years old? I was just a kid. My school organised a field trip, so I went. I swear, it's not like I like them or anything. And I'm not a spy either. I know you don't like Oscorp, sir, but please understand that...
Jeez! Tony shook his head with a heavy sigh. Stop spiraling. You're not getting fired. That's not what I was talking about. Peter's shoulders slumped in relief.
Oh, good. Please don't scare me like that again, Mr. Stark. My heart can't take it.
Don't talk like an old man. Tony rolled his eyes. Don't talk like a girl fishing for gossip, Peter thought, but kept his mouth shut. Tony continued. I think we both know what I was talking about. Would he be so vague if he was sure? Tony was keeping the conversation safe and open to interpretation. Peter made a confused face. He wasn't about to immediately fold.
So what are we talking about?
Tony gave him a look. Nervous but confident in his choice, Peter didn't let his lost child facade slip. They looked at each other for 20 very, very long seconds before Peter spoke up again, uncertainty colouring his voice.
Mr. Stark?
Tony squinted harder, then leaned back. How about we go somewhere more private? Here, let's go to an elevator.
Yeah, that sounds extremely suspicious, sir,
Peter muttered, but let himself be guided to an elevator that definitely wasn't intended for regular employees. Running away now would not help. They entered the elevator and the doors closed behind them. So, Tony turned to stare straight at Peter. Spider-Man, huh? Thankfully, Peter expected a more decisive move on Tony's part and didn't lose his shit. Yet.
Spider-Man?
He repeated, tilting his head a few degrees to the side. Would Spider-Man tilt his head like an innocent puppy? Actually, he would, because he was Peter. But Tony didn't need to know that. Yes. Tony's eyes bore into Peter like they could see through him, right into his soul. Spider-Man. But Peter didn't react to it, no matter how much he wanted the floor to swallow him.
What about him, sir?
Tell me, what do you know about Spider-Man? Starting with the basics. All right, he could do it.
About as much as anyone living in New York, I guess.
Peter shrugged. The elevator was starting to feel claustrophobic with the weight of Tony's attention on him.
Don't you know him better, Mr. Stark? You're both superheroes.
It would be more accurate to call Peter an unaffiliated vigilante, but he didn't want to give Tony another clue by being so pointlessly specific. But when Tony smirked and leaned against the wall, Peter suddenly had a bad feeling. Oh, I do, and I've talked to him recently. Turns out he works for me, right here in Stark Industries. Crazy, right? Tony chuckled. Despite playing nonchalant, he did not stop watching Peter. Apparently he got his powers at Oscorp. It happened about 4 years ago, so I checked every employee of mine that had any connection to Oscorp. Your field trip took place shortly before the first Spider-Man sightings. What a coincidence. Peter froze. How? He didn't say any of that, so how did Tony figure it out? Was his cryptic Oscorp comment really all it took? That was bullshit. No normal person paid so much attention. And again, Tony was in equal parts not normal and nosy. Ugh, Peter and his big stupid mouth. But really, a field trip? Did he not have any actual Oscorp employees to check? Relaxing just enough to look more like a wild rabbit and less like a deer staring into the headlights at 3 a.m., he asked,
Are you trying to say I had something to do with Spider-Man's powers, Mr. Stark?
Okay, let's cut to the chase. I'm saying you're Spider-Man. Uh-oh. Deflect. Peter made sure to look appropriately concerned.
Excuse me, sir, but are you feeling okay?
I'm feeling great. Don't deflect. He knows. That was awkward.
I'm not deflecting.
Peter spoke slowly, choosing his words carefully.
That theory you just said, Mr. Stark, is very interesting, but I don't know anything about it, and it really is just a theory. Do you have any actual evidence of any of that, by any chance?
Asking for evidence was quite confrontational, so Peter did his best to sound gentle. If Tony had it, then it was too late anyway. On the other hand, if Tony did not have any evidence, Peter didn't have to confirm anything. Tony pushed himself off the wall of the elevator and took a few steps closer, lifting a singular finger like he was about to start a countdown. Exhibit 1, he began, sounding very confident. Too confident. My evidence of Spider-Man working for me and how he got his powers is that he told me himself. There's no better evidence than a statement straight from the man in question, am I right? Peter couldn't help but pull back for a moment, dropping the polite confusion in favour of an "Are you fucking kidding me?" expression. He didn't even care about the triumphant smirk on Tony's face. He had never said any of that.
Oh, really? Wow, he deadpanned. Well, I don't recall ever saying anything like that, therefore I cannot be Spider-Man. Open and shut case.
Oh, don't worry, Tony grinned. Memory loss happens to the best of us.
And the worst,
Peter added, looking pointedly at Tony.
But can I get some proof of Spider-Man saying that? An unedited recording will do. I cannot trust hearsay, Mr. Stark. On top of that, I'd like to point out that Spider-Man is clearly secretive about his identity, wearing a mask and all, so anything you've heard from him is most definitely a lie.
Tony cleared his throat. Let's talk about Exhibit 2. He whipped out his phone and, after a few seconds of tapping, turned it around to show Peter a video. Here, Spider-Man can be seen swinging into an alleyway at 10:49. The footage showed exactly that, then sped up considerably. And would you look at that, who exited the same alley at 10:53? The video slowed down again just to show Peter doing exactly that. And that was a bit more troubling. Too bad he couldn't plead the fifth.
Alleyways are great shortcuts, Peter improvised with a shrug. You wouldn't know, being rich and flying in your Iron Man suit, sir, but us peasants need them sometimes.
And what about Spider-Man?
What about him? Peter asked. He probably swung some other way and you're not showing that. Maybe there were no cameras where he went. But even so, he's always in Queens. I live in Queens and we will statistically cross paths at some point, Mr. Stark.
The man surveyed him for a few seconds, fingertips unconsciously drumming against the edge of his phone. I wouldn't think anything of it before. I wouldn't even notice it. But with everything I know now? Tony asked, eyebrows raised high. No way. Multiple times and all of them in alleyways? Peter blinked. In response, Tony showed him another video. And then another, and then...
All right!
Peter raised a hand in front of himself. He was usually careful about changing in public spaces, but sometimes he had no time or choice, hence this situation.
It really doesn't show that I'm Spider-Man though, sir. It just shows that I was in the same location for a very short time.
And what could you have done in such a short time frame?
Accidentally cross paths.
Try again.
Make out?
What? Tony's face went blank.
Make out with Spider-Man?
Peter repeated with no conviction and not much hope in his voice.
I mean, it's possible, right?
Tony blinked slowly. That would be a whole different issue. Half bestiality?
Ew. Peter cringed. Are you speaking like this to Black Widow, sir?
Let's not mention her, Tony hurried to say, like she was about to pop out of the ceiling of the elevator and beat him up. Honestly, Peter could see it happening. We're talking about you right now, and I don't have any footage of you entering those alleyways. On his next patrol, Peter would have to seriously consider destroying all forms of monitoring in the city. Clearly, they weren't doing anything useful.
Cameras are kind of spotty in those parts of New York, so no wonder.
There, an excuse that was actually true. You pay attention to the number and quality of cameras, huh? Tony drawled. Peter crossed his arms over his chest, desperate to put some distance between them.
I'd say I pay the normal amount of attention, the same amount of attention that an average citizen does.
An average citizen would be scared to walk through shady alleyways, Tony shot back.
Well, we have Spider-Man in Queens, so it's not so dangerous anymore.
It's even less dangerous when you're Spider-Man.
Too bad I'm not him.
Peter tried to sound genuine. He really did.
I would feel so safe.
Tony gave him a look that screamed, "It's not working." So you're not gonna admit it. Once again, Peter tried to look politely confused.
I don't have anything to admit, though.
Because I don't have conclusive evidence.
Well,
Peter shrugged awkwardly.
You don't, sir.
I could definitely get some, Tony mused, but I decided to give you a chance first before we move on to more extreme methods. That didn't bode well. In all seriousness, Peter was amazed that Tony didn't take it this far at the start of their acquaintance. He was the type to. But Peter was good at being slippery, and there was not enough leads. After all, the city had a population of over 8 million inhabitants. Eventually, they started working together, protecting New York against all kinds of danger. And when they got closer, Tony understood how much value Spider-Man put on his privacy, and because he had proven trustworthy, the man respected it. Other than an occasional question or reminder that he could reveal himself and Tony wouldn't tell anyone. Getting a hunch that the masked vigilante was working in his own company, right under his nose, was apparently a good enough reason to break the status quo. Oh, and the fact that Peter had basically told him to go right ahead. Maybe he should have plainly asked him not to investigate? Sure, it would be as good as admitting it, but feigning confidence didn't work out that well in hindsight. Peter didn't even know if he could blame the man. If their roles were reversed, he knew he'd be going crazy too.
Extreme?
Peter repeated. Like 24/7 stalking, Tony said, like he was talking about the weather. Or stealing a sample of your DNA to test if you're enhanced. Peter's jaw and hands dropped at the matter-of-fact delivery.
That's so illegal! I could totally sue you!
Tony rolled his eyes. I have good lawyers, but if you want to tell the world why you're suing me, be my guest. Ugh, this man was so incredibly annoying and egocentric. Why couldn't he understand the meaning of a secret identity? Another annoying thing was the fact that Peter kind of wanted them to know who he was. To become a real part of the group and stop being that one guy who never showed his face. But it scared him. Once he did it, he could never take it back. The possibility of putting his aunt and friends in danger was making him sick to his stomach. It was so much safer to continue as they were, the Avengers and the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. A strictly professional relationship, for the most part. Frustrated, Peter crossed his arms and glared at Tony. The man didn't seem to care. Come on, kid, I figured it out already anyway. What's the point in denying? The comment did nothing to make Peter feel less irritated.
If you figured it out, then what's the point in me saying anything? You know best, sir.
Yes, I do, Tony confirmed. Peter rolled his eyes. And I'll take that as a confirmation. A smile appeared on Peter's lips, half tense and half sweet.
You can take things however you want, Mr. Stark. That doesn't change reality.
The look Tony gave him was flat as a board. Reality is that you're a coward. Ouch, that stung, right in the feels.
I'm not a coward,
Peter denied vehemently, recent thoughts about being scared for his close people conveniently forgotten.
Would a coward do the things that I do?
Like what? His mouth was already opening when he had to pause before he said something stupid. After a few more seconds, he decided on,
like follow you to an elevator, sir.
Very funny, Tony huffed, then gave him a challenging look. Do you know what a brave person would do? Reveal their identity on national television. So typical.
I'm not an idiot, sir.
The words escaped him before he could think, making him flush and lower his eyes when he realized that he'd just called his boss stupid. Hearing an answering chuckle, he lifted his gaze back up. Thankfully, Tony didn't seem fazed. How about revealing your identity in a very secure elevator to a highly trustworthy person, then? Peter pressed his lips together, trying not to smile.
Are you talking about Friday?
She's not a person, technically. After a moment, he added, but if you hold her in such high regard, you can confess to her.
Confess? Peter repeated. I'm not in love with her. No offense, Miss Friday.
None taken, Mr. Parker, the voice from the ceiling answered. Great, they're bonding, Tony muttered under his breath. Then he jolted like a light bulb lit up above his head. That reminds me, I've decided to make you my personal intern. It's a much better job than slaving away on the lower floors, and much more prestigious too. Of course, if you ever want to go down there, you still can. I can't guarantee I'll be available every day. I'm a busy man. Once again, Peter was left speechless and without a clue on how to react. A personal intern? To Tony Stark? Iron Man himself? He wanted him to work right next to him? If someone told young Peter that a day like this would come, Peter would either laugh in their face or squeal in excitement. But,
Mr. Stark, you can't do that,
Peter managed to get out, barely not stuttering.
This is not fair. It's nepotism.
Tony smirked. How is it nepotism? It was nepotism because Tony was offering him the job on the basis of being Spider-Man, obviously, not on actual merit. There were so many more experienced employees, but he decided to offer it to someone he knew. How did he not know what nepotism was? Oh. Wait.
Did I say nepotism?
Peter smiled awkwardly, trying to hide his mistake, but visibly struggling.
Sorry, autocorrect. I meant despotism.
What the fuck does? Peter cut him off before he could finish.
What I'm trying to say is this is unfair to other employees.
Nah. Tony said so simply and confidently that Peter could only stand there, mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. The guy in charge of you, whatever his name was, he was singing your praises to the heavens. And I should have found an intern a long time ago. I just didn't want anyone in my workshop. Peter was lost, completely and utterly lost. What was happening? His brain decided to get stuck on the easiest part of the whole speech.
His name is Dr. Miller.
Tony rolled his eyes, not even surprised at the deflection anymore. Wow, you must be reading my mind. That's exactly the answer I wanted. Heat rising to his face, Peter lowered his eyes to the floor again. But he couldn't help it, okay? It was so deeply ingrained, like the same instinct that stopped people from putting their hands in a burning campfire. He forced himself to think about what Tony said.
So, he began slowly, now you want someone.
High time, the man confirmed. Come on, the wage is so much better. Actually, in the sea of pros and cons, that factor had the biggest chance of convincing him to take the job. Money. Him and Aunt May weren't doing that great. They were surviving, yes, but it would only take one unfortunate event, and their carefully crafted semblance of peace would be out the window, gone with the wind. Everyone knew how big the cost of living was these days, especially in a city like New York. Peter had his education and enhanced metabolism to thank for making an even bigger mess of their limited funds. So the offer was very tempting, whether Tony stalked that aspect of his life yet or not. The elevator was quiet. Blood was humming under his skin.
How much better?
Tony considered the question for a moment. Actually, no idea. It's not like I've ever had a personal intern before. His eyes twinkled with mischief. We can make it whenever. How about 2 times?
2 times?
3?
3?
4?
Stop! Time out! Time out!
Frantically, Peter made a T shape with his hands. They were not getting anywhere.
I'm not asking you to say a higher number, Mr. Stark. I'm questioning your sanity.
I know, I just like saying them. Peter could only stand there and look at the man.
I have no words.
Humming knowingly, Tony mused, I bet Spider-Man would have some. Peter narrowed his eyes, looking at him with palpable suspicion.
Maybe.
What do you think he would say? Tony continued, the corner of his mouth rising despite his efforts to keep a straight face. Now, that was easy.
That his job is saving the citizens of New York and he doesn't need another one,
Peter answered without a second of hesitation. After a few more seconds, just to see Tony's reaction, he added,
or maybe he'd punch you.
The way Tony's face twisted in disbelief and then mock outrage was very satisfying. I don't think Spider-Man would punch someone for offering him a job. He disagreed, sounding more than a little insulted.
You think you know Spider-Man better than me?
Peter challenged, almost rolling his eyes. Oh, wait, he didn't even admit it yet.
The guy who was in the same alley as him 2 times?
Much better. Disaster averted. 2 times? Tony made a face and shook his head. I can't compete with that. Then his expression cleared and became serious again. So, about the job. This again. It took a lot out of Peter not to wince. The problem wasn't the job itself. Being Tony Stark's personal intern was probably the best job on the planet, and everyone in the building would sell a kidney to get it. The problem was everything that came with it. Spider-Man wasn't an Avenger. Instead, he kept to himself, independent and always there for the little guy. Peter Parker worked for Stark Industries, true, but as long as Tony didn't know about his secret identity, there was no conflict of interest. So naturally, now that he knew, Peter was dreading what changes it could cause to their dynamic. He wanted to keep his day job and extracurricular endeavours separate.
Mr. Stark.
The words were careful, slow. He didn't know what to say. Before he could make up his mind, Tony cut him off. Actually, why am I even asking you? I've already made my decision. Let's go up to the lab. I'll let you have a test trial. The elevator moved.
A trial?
He knew the word well, but somehow it tasted unfamiliar. Yeah, Tony confirmed. To see if you like it. Spoiler, you will like it. Of course he would like it, that wasn't the problem. Peter couldn't wrap his head around something completely different.
But why?
The elevator stopped and the door opened. They stood there in silence for a few long moments before Tony spoke up. Because I'm not getting any younger, and I'm in just the right position to nurture talent. The next generation has to have some hope too. Don't make my life any harder, all right? Huh. It seemed honest. And something about it made a crack in Peter's walls. It didn't obliterate them, not yet, but it was a start. Despite his reluctance, Peter let Tony whisk him away, and he did actually like it. The lab was extremely cool. All the Iron Man suits, all the robots, he couldn't believe he was actually there. Him, the real him, the simple nerd Peter Parker, not Spider-Man climbing the walls and stopping moving cars, even though the reason Tony invited him was because he found out about his secret, but he could ignore it for now. Working with Avengers on and off did nothing to subside his fan tendencies. It was taking everything in Peter not to start gushing. Maybe it wasn't so bad to be known. Not by everyone, but this was fine. Tony gave Peter a tour of the workshop, and it was getting progressively harder and harder not to stare. Oh, how he wished to have something similar. But no, he had to make his tech in his bedroom or at school. It was either dumpster diving or stealing school supplies. One day. At last, Tony leaned on the workbench, looking very satisfied with himself. So, how is it? He asked, like someone who already knew the answer. And Peter couldn't just let him have it.
What, want me to compliment you and your billionaire setup?
Peter guessed. What I'm hearing is that it's worth compliments. Looking around, Peter let out a non-committal hum.
I'd make a better one if I was as rich as you.
Wanna bet? Tony glanced back at Tony and saw the challenge in his eyes. No, he immediately denied. He wasn't going to play this game.
The lab is amazing, the best I've ever seen.
And you want to work here. Tony's words were like nails trying to pin him down without a chance of escape.
Totally,
he chirped, voice heavy with sarcasm as he rolled his eyes. Not sure how to take it, Tony measured him with a look that made it impossible for Peter to keep a straight face. Slowly, the corners of his mouth lifted until he was beaming at Tony. The man watched him for a few seconds before sighing. I have a feeling it's going to be hard to stay mad at you without that mask. This time, Peter didn't bother responding, but his smile got even brighter.